Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education on Monday, March 22nd, 2021. If you'd please join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. No presentations this evening, so Madam Superintendent, do you have any comments for us this evening?
Just a few updates. First, we have had a series of meetings on the sale of our bonds, and I'm pleased to note that the Attorney General has finally completed their phase of the process and turned that back in. So we have a number of additional steps, and they will be bringing additional resolutions back to the board in May as each one of those steps are completed. And thank you much to Ms. Skinner, who was very vocal about the need for urgency in this process, because it has not moved as quickly as we would like. So we have really pushed for them to prioritize us a bit more in their process, and hopefully that will happen. Another thing is we completed another round of vaccinations on Friday. Yay! And at this point, every employee who has requested a vaccination has been provided with one. As you know, the state has also offered to vaccinate family members age 18 and over of any employee. At this point, we've had a little over 400 people sign up with the State Department. That vaccination will be scheduled, and we will notify those folks as soon as we receive information on when they're sending the vaccines. So, yeah, again, another good step for safety for us. Which brings us to in terms of safety, the status of the community currently. As you know, Jefferson County turned red on the DHHR map, and by order of the governor, we are ordered to move all high school students to full remote, even as elementary, preschool, and middle school students continue to come to school and have in-person instruction. It has been a source of enormous frustration, quite frankly, for our staff, for our students. We are getting down into crunch time. As Dr. Joy can tell you, as a high school teacher, this is an utterly crucial time of year for us. We will struggle with some students who are very much on the fringe in terms of meeting their graduation requirements, and we need every minute that we can get with them. And this in and then back out and remote is incredibly difficult. I've heard from a number of superintendents, and I myself contacted the state superintendent this weekend to find out what options we have. Also, we reached out to our local health department to ask for their support in ensuring that all of the data that was feeding into the system for RED was accurate. They have been very, very supportive. We greatly appreciate their help in ensuring that the data is accurate. Again, at this point, there is some frustration around the state with what they perceive to either be inaccuracy with the data or what they perceive to be inequities in how we're treating the different students that they don't believe is warranted based on our transmission rates in the school. Again, very same argument that we've had all along. Our students are safe in our schools. We have very, very limited transmission in schools, and it is a place where we have a great deal more control than having them in the community. So far, those pleas have fallen on deaf ears. But there are a number of boards across the state that I can tell you are contemplating their legal options in terms of going to the governor's attention regarding this particular portion of the order. So I will keep the board updated about that process. And then last but certainly not least, we've met several times with Shepherd University, and I just want to give them a shout out. They have been utterly phenomenal in planning for the million details that have to go into the level of care we've taken with this graduation. It will look quite different than previous graduations. And we are to the point where we believe that we will be able to release some information on process, what to expect, tickets, either late this week or the beginning of next week, now that we've answered several logistical questions. So very pleased about that. Also, very, very proud and pleased of the high school administrative staff, because they have worked hard to be able to hold the prom in a safety compliant manner. Again, we are still working through some of the details with, safety support, health department, to be able to hold that safely. But as of right now, that is our intention, and we believe we have a viable plan to do so. So we're doing all that we can to support students to have more normalcy back and some of the markers of a high school experience. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Deputy Superintendent of Operations, Ms. White, are you with us this evening?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening.
This evening, I'm proud to announce that that we have welcomed Dylan Bites, our new child nutrition coordinator, aboard with us. Last week, we were able to socially distance, and we went around, and Dylan was able to meet each and every cook. He had a warm, wonderful reception from the cooks, and we got to smell warm rolls and lots of good aromas coming from the kitchen. We appreciate the cooks, their flexibility, their dedication this year, their ability to pivot from remote meals to in-person meals, and sometimes doing both. So Dylan is very much ready to go. He is engaged this week on working on some spring break feeding. During our visits also, we asked cooks for additional feedback on a menu item, which we've added recently to our lunch menus. They indicate that they and the students are appreciative of the new menu item, and that so far, these menu items are welcome additions that many students are taking advantage of and enjoying. So we were very glad to have that feedback. A special note too in touring our schools is the cleanliness in the schools, and I want to continue to applaud the custodians for keeping our facilities absolutely spotless. They look amazing, and their extra steps and care that they're taking in every detail is just absolutely amazing. So thank you to them. In maintenance, we continue to work on normal projects and sustain those, as well as to work our way towards summer bond projects. We have on deck this summer the Jefferson High Turf Field, an awning for Shipley, 4 roof projects that we're going to tackle, Blue Ridge campus exterior brick repairs, some HVAC units at Ranson, some resurfacing of tennis courts, and Shepherdstown Middle bleacher replacement, along with converting some water fountains to bottle fill stations, and dealing with some asphalt track repairs at Charlestown Middle School, and replacing carpet in certain classrooms. So those are in various stages of preparation, and some of those are getting ready to launch and begin in the very near future, like our turf field. In technology, we ordered the K2 laptops, so we're now in the waiting line, along with probably every school system in America, but we're very excited to be in the waiting line. Technology is monitoring and keeping a close relationship with our vendor on other shipments of Chromebooks, which we are still awaiting. The current technology focus is getting students and devices ready for our spring summative state assessments. And in safety, last week, the Jefferson County Health Department lowered quarantine for unvaccinated people and for students to 10 days from 14 days. So that is a new change that we wanted to make the board aware of this evening. And that concludes my update for tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And a quick note on the vaccines, I don't know if anybody knows, the state today reduced it to 16 and over with health conditions, so that may affect some of our students. So just as a little side note there. All right, approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the regular board meeting held March 8th, 2021 and the special meeting held March 16th, 2021?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Any discussion of the minutes? All in favor of approving the minutes from March 8th and March 16th, say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. All right, citizens' comments. This evening we have Ms. Bobby Block. So if you could please bring up Ms. Block. Good evening, Ms. Block. Whenever you're ready, I'll start the 3-minute timer. Ms. Block, are you there? Doesn't look like she's muted, is she?
She did mute it, but she took it off, or somebody took it off.
She's in the queue as a panelist and she has her microphone on and open.
Ms. Block, are you there? Oh, she's muted. Did you?
She was off and it's been off and on. She's muted now, yes.
Ms. Block, if you're speaking, you're muted right now.
No, she's off.
You're not muted anymore, but we can't hear you.
As you can see when the microphone that we have for the host, as you can see it moving up and down, there's sound coming into it, and right now it doesn't appear to be. She's unmuted, but there doesn't appear to be any sound filtering in from that mic.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on. Ms. Block, if you're there, if you can hear us and we can't hear you, if you want to just send Dr. Gibson a quick note in chat saying that you're having technical difficulties, we'll get it figured out. All right. Next up, we have the consent agenda. I see there's at least one change on there, is that correct? Is Ms. Lauren going to be joining us?
If the board has any questions, yes ma'am.
Okay, well, there's the one change. Does someone want to address that? Or
Ms. Loring, you're in as a panelist, if you would like to, address the question.
It looks like there's one change. I just wanted, if you could just review that real quick or mention that.
Yes, there is one change on there. There was a correction to move Mr. McCubbin from an approval where he's actually transferring from one position into another. So that is the correction for this evening.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Any questions? All right, all in favor of the consent agenda, say aye.
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 Oppose? All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Loring. All right, unfinished business, we have none. New business. Action on approval to advertise for an RFP to provide a learning management system.
Mr. Dilly will be joining us for that presentation. Mr. Dilly, your mic is muted, sir.
Sorry about that. I thought I clicked it. I just missed the edge of it. Good evening, board members. We want to thank you for this evening. We've brought before you this evening for your consideration a request for proposals for the learning management system. Just ask for your approval this evening, and I'll wait till discussion to discuss a few items that I wish to highlight for your behalf.
All right, is there a motion to approve to advertise for an RFP to provide a learning management system, LMS?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Thank you, Ms. Ogden. All right, any questions for Mr. Dilly?
So we'll go ahead and quickly share here for you guys this evening. Wanted to just to highlight a couple of items on here. The pretty quick turnaround that our hope is to, with all of the preliminary work that we've done to accomplish the task at hand, we feel confident that we can try to have something put in place, because as we know, for successful implementation, we have to prepare some summertime professional development and moving into next year. So as you can see, the timeline is pretty quickly approaching, but we are anticipating doing that. I also wanted to showcase this evening, and I apologize, I saw there was a clerical error on the item that you saw this evening, but as you can see, the different groups, stakeholder groups that met, were able to put together quite a few areas of interest and focus that we wanted to make sure that a learning management system could support for the district, and we appreciate their feedback. And I just wanted to quickly thank Dr. Rowan, Michelle Cantley, Joel Silver, Kathy Farrow, Tara Mahoney, and Mary Lynn for their efforts in organizing various groups and stakeholders, and we will be utilizing stakeholders to make the final decision surrounding these particular areas. Just also wanted to just showcase for folks in the audience out there this evening, there's obviously descriptions here as well, but we are, as you can tell, put together a pretty robust rubric in our efforts to make sure that we are finding a tool that best fits the needs of the district, and we are confident that with the folks and the information that we put together, we're going to pick a good solution for moving us forward as a district and meeting the needs of the board's goals. So that's all I just wanted to share in case you had any questions this evening.
All right, any questions?
Do we have a sheet on that?
Yes. It's not a hard copy, it's in the computer.
Oh, it's on the computer. Oh, okay.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor. All in favor of advertising for an RFP to provide a learning management system?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item B, action on approval to extend county FFCRA for the 2020 to 2021 school year. Welcome back, Ms. Loring.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, sorry. On behalf of the employees, I did want to take this opportunity to thank you for extending the county FFCRA until March 31st, 2021, to give them all the fair opportunity to continue to use this benefit as we continue to live with COVID. March 31st is coming very quickly, and as you can see with the news today, that our county is in red, and we continue to battle the conditions of the pandemic. Therefore, we think it's fair and appropriate request to ask for the board's permission and authorization to continue the county FFCRA for the remainder of the 2021 school year. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve to extend the county FFCRA for the 2020-21 school year? Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Any questions for Ms. Loring? All right. All in favor of approving to extend the FFCRA for the rest of the school year? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right. Item C, review of fiscal year 21 financial data. Ms. Marone, are you there?
There's somewhere still in the building.
I am here. Let me see if I can start my video. I apologize. Good evening, board members, Madam Superintendent. This evening I am here to review both our current fiscal position as required by law and to also segue into our fiscal year 22 levy, adopted levy rates. Okay, there we go, sorry. As West Virginia law requires, we are reviewing where at a very high level we are falling fiscal year 21, our financial position. I'm going to review our revenue and then our expenditures and move into some of the data that we'll be looking at as we segue into our fiscal year 22 budget presentation. From a revenue perspective, all revenue is expected to come in as planned. Our property taxes are trending as through February. As through February, the same as what we have traditionally, maybe even a percentage of collection slightly up. All other revenue I expect to be received without any issues. Any questions on revenue?
Ms. Marone, do you, are you able to screen share any, information on your presentation, or?
I can't see it.
No, ma'am, I suspected that you thought we could. So,
I did. And actually Jason just came and asked if I was okay, if you can hang on 1 second.
that was why he asked. Do you need some assistance?
I do.
Yes, ma'am, I'll be
More
right there.
assistance needed in finance.
thing, you're good with numbers, right? That's cute.
I figured she thought that was up.
And then click on if you want to show. And then hit share.
Woohoo.
Seven?
We got it.
Beautiful.
Good?
Much better.
Okay. Um, okay, let's start again. So we're gonna review revenue and expenditures at a very high level for this fiscal year to ascertain where we are, as we segue into fiscal year 22's budget. Revenue, on page 3, that you should see, all revenue is expected to come in, on target with the exception of possibly our investment earnings. I think the budget was, lower than what, expected for collections, even with the dip in the interest rates currently. Taxes through February are trending consistent with prior years, and actually a slight uptick at about 87% of total taxes for the fiscal year already collected. Of course, state aid and all of our state funding should be received in full and entirely. Other local revenue includes our P card rebate, our fuel tax rebate, ROTC contributions, and at this point, all of those are expected to hit targeted budget amounts. Are there any questions on revenue?
Beth, I have 2 questions.
Okay.
One is the table referendum with the shutdown over there. How much has that affected that line item? Number 1, and number 2, our drop from on state aid to schools between our current budget and our actual.
That's just as the, on the state aid, Mrs. Ogden, that is just the collection, the percent that we collected up through January 31st. The
Okay.
budget is expected to be received from the state, through June 30th without an issue. On the table referendum, that is the contribution for capital expenditures within our general operating budget, which is what we're referring to this evening. And we transfer the 1.6 million, and adopt our budget with that 1.6 million. So even though our collections due to COVID, last fiscal year, we collected 0 referendum funds for the month of April and for the month of May, it did not impact fiscal year 21's budget because we had already allocated the 1.6 million from the balance of those referendum funds. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Salary and benefits. Salary and benefits are comparing the current budget to the actuals. And in the case of payroll projections, where I know that we have salaries or other payments to be made, there have been a projected allocated. You can see that under professional substitutes and service substitutes that I haven't projected out those expenditures. This year is a little more untraditional for seeing how those expenditures are actually occurring. On benefits, those are group insurance, our dental vision, and PEIA or health insurance. Some of those have been projected out to the best of my ability, and some will project out or trend out through the next 3 months, 3 or 4 months. I can say that with salary and benefits that the professional and service line items, we will probably have a favorable balance in addition to the supplemental pay substitute costs are not trending as high as normal due to the remote learning environment and just less need at this time for those services. Under insurance, I'm seeing the data suggest that with COVID and the shutdown and the remote in and out, that with the self-insured programs, we are not having as high of claim usage as in a normal traditional year, and that will possibly also translate into some carryover at the end of this fiscal year when we close out our books. Workers' comp, no expenditures at this point. Recently, the ESERF or CARES funding that we received ended up covering 50% the cost of our unemployment claims for the last quarter of fiscal year 20 and the first 2 quarters of fiscal year 21. Any questions on salary and benefits for fiscal year 21?
Are we gonna project then for next year? Are we gonna go back 2 years to project for salary and benefits for obviously like additional staff or substitutes costs and things like that? Is that how we're doing that? Because we're hoping
for the most part, everything that will be projected out for 22 will pretty much look at fiscal year 19 and 18 for trend data and for all projections and moving forward. Expenses or non-salary related items are categorized by object code, which is the expense, meaning that we roll all of the departments into those expense line items and project the budget. The actuals, encumbrances or purchase orders or commitments that have already been board approved, and balances are balances as of January 31st, and may or may not include an anticipated expense within a department. On the non-salary items, I will say that there is nothing at this point that is not trending towards what is expected. I do think that some of the departments at this point are evaluating what their balances are and looking to prepare into fiscal year 22 as much as possible. Any questions on non-salary items? In the same sense, it's sort of an untraditional year, but the data at this point is suggesting lower usage in energy, lower usage in waste management, fuel, all of your fixed costs seem less than what a traditional educational year would produce. Any questions on revenue and expenditures or the current fiscal position of where we're at as of today as we move into and segue into the fiscal year 22 budget?
Beth, I have a comment I'd like to make. As we project out into 22, we talked about and put some money back for fields. And I think the amount that we talked about is not nearly enough. I think we need to look at those 2 fields. I think we need to look at tennis courts. I think we need to look at tracks and figure on a 10-year basis or so, whatever the life expectancy is, and try to get an estimate of what we're going to need in 10 years and start putting more than we talked about last year back, or we're going to be once again, we're not going to be in the shape we were this year, but we're not going to be able to cover those expenditures in 10 years if we don't do that. So I'm thinking as much as $300,000 a year, or maybe even more, if we're going to cover those things completely over that period of time.
I think that has been a conversation that we are having, and I think that with are through this budget process, that it is a high priority and we are looking at that. And also looking at a total cost for those capital expenditures, not just for athletic fields, but we are also working on a similar projection for our roofs, our HVAC systems, and our vehicles. So I know that our athletic account at this point has $350,000 in it from the past 2 years, Mr. Osborne, and we were at this point looking at 100,000 contribution for this year. We do also have for the replacement of the turf fields, some other funds that we're looking at setting aside and bringing to the board during the adoption of the fiscal year 22 budget.
Thank you.
And a total expenditure, and again, that is at this point not board directed, but it could, if we present something that has a minimum and a maximum amount for each of those line items and an annual contribution, if the board directs it, then we would not have to come back to the board, and it would be built into that budget process, and we would not have the flexibility of removing it, but in making the choice that that was the first option before balancing the final budget. Any other questions on fiscal year 21 budget to action approvals?
With our
Okay, the
revenue,
next three, oh, go ahead.
hey Beth, with our revenue sources, do we feel comfortable with what we have, and then the decrease in the expenditures that we've done, we will have enough to allocate where it needs to go and do what we need to do based on this year and the different changes that we've had as far as students, and as well with, like you were talking about, the energy costs and the fuel costs, things we did not have to expend on. Will that pretty much be an offset for us to be able to balance pretty well?
I think that our plan is that that carryover will definitely allow us to have multiple years to address the decline in student enrollment, and secondly, to determine on our next October 1st enrollment what rebound of student enrollment we have recovered from this pandemic. So I think it will definitely offset the decline in revenue from both the state and moving forward a projection of that carryover to assist with fiscal year 22 balancing of the budget. Okay, the next few slides are where we are currently and some data that we have as we move into fiscal year 22. Slide 8 is the fiscal year 21 adopted positions, and that is by professional and service and in the two different categories. FTEs are the way that we are funded, meaning that on the service side, a one position can be up to 1.3 FTEs. Headcount is actual bodies. Slide 9 is how we ended our fiscal year 20 when we closed out our books, what our ending fund balance was, what commitments we had, what assignments the board asked us to designate funds to, what POs we had already committed and what those balances were in total, and what the fiscal year unassigned carryover amount ended with, which will also be a starting point as we move into fiscal year 22. Slide 10 is the trend data for our second month enrollment and the percentage of change in number and of students for both headcount and FTE. For the purposes of funding the school system, The State Department uses the FTE number for projecting out the formula that they believe we need for revenue to administer a school system. And the trend data is from fiscal year 13 and forward. Slide number 11 is a preliminary shot of what our preliminary comps, final comps for the funding formula by the state look like as we move into fiscal year 22, and how the decrease of the pandemic enrollment has impacted that revenue. And you can see that in total, we're looking about 3.8 million down, and 443 FTE students down. Now, with that as a starting point, Mr. Osborne, pass back to your question. We are still looking at our future needs and annual saving plans for the highest categories and board priorities that we've heard over the past year. How we're going, go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. How we're going to address the decline in revenue, we are looking at staff alignment to align student services through need and attrition and transfers for our staffing ends, increasing our recruitment efforts, looking at our special education program very thoroughly, and then investing in virtual and support services to possibly attract some of those decreased student enrollment or loss of students for this year as we move into fiscal year 22. Are there any other questions for fiscal year 21 and some of the data as we move into fiscal year 22?
Looks like you got off.
Into the first presentation for fiscal year 22, and that will be our proposed levy rates. And if you give me 1 second, see if I can remember how to share the screen.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Marone. It looks like you got off easy with questions this evening.
Thanks. All right, I might need Jason one more time to help me share my, oh, wait a minute.
I hear him going across the hall.
Yeah. He's coming to your rescue.
I know, I was gonna run in there and be quicker, but thanks, Jason. Oh, where it is. Meeting controls, okay. This one? Okay. Sure.
Tanya Dallas-Lewis was becoming quite the pro at being able to teach people how to come off, reshare, how in the great presentations that they did for the month. It was great. She was really getting good at it.
Sure. Okay. Okay. Can you guys see my presentation? Sorry about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Jason. All right. Okay. Our second presentation is for the fiscal year 22 proposed levy rates, which actually is a brand new levy or the excess levy is a brand new levy for this year. As an overview, we're going to just quickly talk about the assessed values and the change in assessed values from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 22. current expense levy, which is also referred to as a regular levy, our bond levy, which is brand new also, and our excess levy. Those are the three types of levies that a school system can incur. Just a brief overview of the actual levy process is that the assessor assesses the property values, submits those, collects the property taxes, prints the statements, sends them to our community for them to pay the taxes, and then submits those checks some of those checks come directly to our school system, and in the case of a bond levy, they go directly to the Municipal Bond Commission to pay the principal and interest on the payments of the bonds. In the community, when you receive your tax bill, depending on whether you are within the municipality or not, approximately 75% of that tax bill comes to the school system. In fiscal year 20, 38% of the total revenue was from property taxes. And you can see the breakdown of how those actual taxes came in and at what percent and what percentage of 100, and then also the dollar cost of what we received. This year, our assessed values are up approximately 2.48%. That data suggests that the majority of that growth is residential, and that even during this time, we are still building and growing our tax base, residentially anyway. This year, our current or our regular levy, which has an inverse relationship with our PSSP, which is the funding formula for our state aid, it's up by $300,000. The decrease in that is offset by the state contribution to our school system. Our bond levy, congratulations, both the bond and the excess levy passed at 61% and 67% this fiscal year. Our bond levy is for 5 years and at $43.7 million, and we are currently, as Dr. Gibson gave an update earlier today, in the process of selling those bonds on the market. This bond projection, or I'm sorry, this levy projection, not the presentation, but the schedule of proposed levy rates, which was in your executive session and content, and after tonight's board meeting will be published in the newspaper for our public and community to see, does include an estimated tax levy on the sale of those bonds. Our excess levy this year is up from fiscal year 21, approximately $378,000. It will help us to offset the decrease of $3.8 million on the state revenue, and is primarily from that residential growth that our county saw over the past year. Slide 10 is the allocation, and actually similar mirror to what our voters saw on the levy call and authorized for 5 years and in approval. Those are the different categories and the estimated budget amounts for each line item. Slide 11 is just some trend data for the estimated amounts for the proposed budgets over the past 10 years. You can see that between fiscal year 10 and fiscal year 14 or 13 is when the significant economic decline occurred, and our excess levy was hit hard by a 25% decrease in percentage and about $5 million in collections. Slide number 11 gives you a review from fiscal year 12 to the present, just in total estimated budget and what those actual collections came in at. And you can see that this year our allowance will remain at the 5.5%, and that at least over the past 3 years, we are collecting exactly where we want to with those projections. Any questions on your fiscal year 22 levy rates?
I don't have a question, but what you're asking us to do this evening is to approve the proposed levy rate for fiscal year 22, correct?
That is correct. Proposed pending state board or state auditor approval, and reconvening on the third Tuesday
April 20th.
of April to officially adopt those rates if the state auditor approves them also.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the proposed levy rates for fiscal year 22?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. Any discussion or questions? All right. All in favor of approving the proposed levy rates for fiscal year 22?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Marone.
Thank you.
Action item E, 2021 to 22 program needs planning.
Yes, ma'am. As you saw at the end of Ms. Marone's slide, we are actively planning for next year's budget to present to you in April. So we wanted to talk to you about some of the priorities that we had as a staff and have discussed to ensure that we both include on there things that are important to you, and if you see any blind spots of things that we've missed that we've discussed, so that we can work towards this. This is simply a discussion and a heads up. These are the things that, based on what we know, we think are a priority. None of it is for approval or action tonight. So as you saw, one of the things that we are reviewing and will be proposing are cyclical replacement budgets. We have a host of items that are very large capital expenditures that we do not have a recurring funding source for those. Most of our funding sources are operational. They are for things that occur every year. So one of the things that we will be proposing in the upcoming budget, if the board agrees that it's a priority, are separate, as I said, cyclical replacement accounts. Currently, we are proposing these for athletic fields, for replacement of vehicles. We have a schedule for those vehicle replacements, and you guys have seen that spreadsheet, but we don't have a funding source set aside for it to save up that money over time. We simply have to take it from the maintenance budget in years when we believe we can afford it. We have one for roofs. Right now, roofs are a very expensive proposition for us. We patch them to the extent that we can. We certainly, and you guys know this as homeowners yourselves, it is a major expense when it has to be done. We are also proposing the same for HVAC units. Again, a new replacement HVAC unit for something the size of the ones on Washington High School is upwards of $25,000. I mean, it is a very expensive replacement cost for us. And last but not least, we are proposing one for our technology one-to-one initiative. Those laptops, it's wonderful that we have the funding this year to get to one-to-one status for our students. And as soon as we get them in their hands, they begin depreciating and they begin wear and tear. And so we have to have a budget to be able to replace them on a regular basis. And we've had this discussion with our staff. It's wonderful when we put in new initiatives, when we put in things that we know our constituents need. When we put them in, we have to fund a line item for their replacement on a schedule. If it's important enough for us to do, we need to keep doing it. All right, so if there is any other category of item you believe we need to do that for, I would love to hear your feedback on that. I would also convey that for each one of these, you talked about $100,000 a year not being enough. $100,000 on each one of these, and we have a $500,000 less in our budget every year. So there has to be some balance to saving for the future and being able to fund ourselves now. And sometimes that means making difficult decisions. So I'm simply trying to ascertain, does the board feel like these cyclical replacement accounts are of value and a good practice for us to have? Do you have other things that you think we should add to that while we're building the budget?
I think it's very important that we plan for the future, and maybe many of us here won't be sitting on this board when that money is spent, but I think somebody's gonna be very thankful 10 years from now that we had that foresight. And I think we build our own budgets at home, I hope we do, in a similar type of way.
Yes, sir.
I would definitely agree with Mark and say as well, you know, when we kind of started this process, even I was looking at some of the budgetary numbers that Ms. Morone gave us tonight, and I think back, you know, 8 years ago when we were in the red and we were not where we needed to be, and it was a goal to say we have to have a balanced budget, we have to get money in the bank, we have to be able to, you know, do things like buy land with cash so we don't burden taxpayers. And a lot of the decisions we've made have been very difficult because we haven't replaced positions. We haven't, you know, we've done it all to where we didn't feel a lot of that pain, but we all knew where it was and how difficult it's been. And recognizing that, you know, this is just the next step in that, of making sure that, you know, it isn't gonna be, it's not about us, it's about Jefferson County Schools and the future of Jefferson County Schools. So any decision we can make is gonna be better for the future of Jefferson County Schools is what we need to do.
And we might not be able to do it every year.
Right.
I mean, we'll have to look at each budget, and, you know, if we went back to that budget between years 2010 and 13, I'm not sure we could have done those things then.
I do like the idea of the minimum maximum as at least a starting point.
Yes.
I thought that was a good idea,
Absolutely.
for each year to look at those.
Thank you. One of the other things that we felt like was vitally important is right now we are serving kids who have some pretty significant needs in terms of academic support. As you saw in a previous presentation, when we moved our social emotional support to a triage system where basically every student who needed that type of support was funneled through that department, and it was staffed through a multidisciplinary team who reviewed that child's needs and who had all of the different programs under one roof, and without parents jump through hoops on separate ones or our own staff, they were able to both provide them with those services fairly seamlessly and to see where we had service gaps for those because it was all gathered together. So one of the things that we will be proposing is for us to create the same sort of system for academics, meaning for every child who needs a service or a program that is outside of our just regular K through 12 system, we would have all of those under one umbrella in terms of, and we've been referring to it as responsive instruction, because essentially we believe that as our families and our students' needs get more complex, our instructional programs will get more complex. So with these, we are talking about placing all of these under one roof with responsive instruction covering virtual, OLC, homebound, home-based, career and technical, options pathways, APEX, tracking student success into post-secondary. We believe that if we use the same model that we did with SOMO, we will see some of the same successes with that. At this point, we believe that we could accomplish that without additional staffing and making some just responsibility changes within those. Again, all of these things that things that we will bring back to you during the budget for your consideration. We just want to discuss your priorities now. In terms of what we believe is the next greatest area of need is special education. Right now, even as our special education numbers have decreased overall, certain categories have increased. For instance, our overall population of students with disabilities has decreased by nearly 80 students, but we're up 9 students for students who require intensive autism programming. So you can have less students in one area, but you have more students in another area that requires very intensive staffing. And these are often the students who require such an extraordinary level of services that they're placed out of the system in day treatment. So we really want to focus more intensely on, number one, developing an in-county alternative to day treatment programs, and having to create it at such a scale as it is economically feasible for us. Some of these programs are as intensive as having 3 staff people to 1 student. We can't sustain that. We have to be able to both, yes, provide very intensive services, but do it within a model that's sustainable. In addition, we have a very significant number of supporting staff in our programs for special needs students, some of which are there simply because of how our programming is set up, the model that we use for scheduling. And we have had a lot of discussion about a thorough audit in which we both, number one, take a very proactive approach with the West Virginia Department of Education, because right now there are regulatory roadblocks to us being able to do an in-county day treatment program, and taking a fairly intensive approach to looking at our delivery models for special education, in particular more intentional focus and support in inclusion classrooms, to be able to be less focused on self-contained classrooms for those students' well-being, and also for us to look at support models that are more inclusive of students in both participating in the general education population and progressing from grade to grade in terms of intensity of academic support, and not just behavioral. The next thing that we believe is important and wanted to look at is us revising some of our positions. Right now, with the retirement of Dr. Hoff, it's a good opportunity for us to bundle these in ways that perhaps make a little bit more sense in terms of combining safety with maintenance rather than attendance. That was always an odd pairing with those, because maintenance is responsible for maintenance, safety plans, energy efficient requirements, reporting, camera systems, entryway security, all of those things, and that is often tied with the safety program. And then with attendance, certainly keeping attendance with court as a natural consequence of attendance issues, and the calendar to look at maintaining that process. We also are looking at additional duties that we might put there, including administrative transfers and maybe some extracurricular responsibilities countywide. We can, again, do all of those things with no new positions and no change in fiscal impact. The next need that we believe we have is a little more intentionality and focus on program reviews in terms of reviewing programs for effectiveness based on their original purpose and bringing to the board reporting on what change was affected as a result of us implementing that program. For instance, Ukaroo, Read 180, Balanced Literacy. We have a number of programs and we put them in place, and then yes, we do monitor outcomes to an extent. We don't always take those outcomes and tie them back to a very specific program when we think that that's something that's necessary. And we believe that combining that with testing, because often we use the academic results to determine whether or not a program is effective. And again, no position changes with that. We have heard concerns from the board and from some of our parents about our athletic programs, particularly at the high school, and a desire for those to be as consistent as possible between different locations. There were some concerns over differences in programming and scheduling, along with some discussion of how we might ensure a greater level of equity with that. And I do have to say, one of the positives of this pandemic has been a very hard force to a lockstep in terms of us following WVSSAC and us making consistent decisions between the schools for how we'll move forward with an athletic program. It's probably the highest level of consistency that I've seen since I've been here. And you know, we are certainly hopeful that we could continue in that model. If there is a desire to have a single centralized AD who's responsible for both schools, there would be a requirement that we at least have an assistant at each school. The volume of scheduling, and you know, each one of those places has like 80 plus coaches who have to be evaluated, which would require an additional position. We could look at cutting assistant director stipends to help fund those, but that would again be a decision of the board during the budget process. And if that was something that the board desired, we would certainly recommend that it be adjusted to an athletic coordinator position, simply to minimize the fiscal impact of it. There was also discussion from the board of extracurricular arts programs. And again, same thing that we talk about all the time. We want children in Jefferson to have equitable experiences. It shouldn't matter where you go to school. And there are some programs that are staff dependent, and staff's willingness or exuberance to go and run an after school club or to have a specialized choral group. And I think the idea from the board was that that an individual who was tasked with that could then sort of drive that programming and that consistency. Again, if that's the case, we would recommend, rather than having a new position, that we task one of our central office coordinators with that job, with the thought that the place that made the most sense would be the coordinator of attendance, because they could work to increase student engagement, which has an effect on attendance. But again, we work at the will of the board, and we take direction from you in terms of what you believe our highest priorities are. So we just wanted to get some feedback from you about whether or not those are things that you also consider priorities, or there are other things that you'd like us to add to that list while we're developing the budget.
I have some questions.
Yes, ma'am.
some of these are new positions, some of these are raises, they would be because they're transferred to director positions instead of coordinator. Where would the money come from?
Again, if we present a budget to the board, if we ask for an addition in one area, they have to be offset by a decrease in another area. Now, for us, if those are things that the board considers a priority, then we would be responsible for having cuts in another area. We have already made the commitment that we will not cut any instructional funding to schools. We have already said outright that we won't do that. There are some things that we are either delaying or that we have determined we have a lessened need for, that we could utilize, but we would bring those to the board as part of the budget process.
So there's no new money needed, it's just rearranging, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Within our overall budget, we don't have the capacity to generate any additional revenue as a
Yeah,
school
I didn't know
system.
if you were tapping into the levy somehow, or I'm just trying to get an understanding.
Well, what I am conveying is that we don't have any additional revenue sources. And when we bring you the budget, we are going to bring you a balanced budget. So anything that we knew that we have in there, we have an offsetting, here's what we removed or reduced. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Has the attorney, Laura Sutton and Amy Loring, Human Resources Director, have they approved any of these ideas? Do they,
Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't hear you.
No, I wasn't sure if you were finished, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm just wondering, have they approved these things?
A couple of things. Number one, neither the attorney nor the chief human resources officer approves any staffing. The superintendent recommends staffing changes to the board under an action item, and then the board votes to approve or not approve positions.
I'm not asking you that. I'm asking because I noticed that one of these appears to be a violation of state code. So I would have thought that the attorney would have, checked to make sure. That's why I'm asking.
Well, ma'am, so certainly state code requires that you submit the attendance as a director of attendance. That does not require us to stipend that as a director of attendance at the local level.
I'm sorry, but you're saying that you can change the name of the position from director of attendance to coordinator.
I am asking you currently as a board if you share these priorities and you wish us to focus in these areas or you do not. I am not bringing you a staffing proposal at this time.
I understand that, but I'm trying to get clarification. So for this position that you mentioned, director of attendance, you say rip that position and create coordinator of attendance. But this, Article 8, the code 18-8-3 specifically says that you have to have a director of school attendance. So this seems that it may violate state code, which whether we wanted to or not, we can't do that. That's where I'm getting at.
Yes, ma'am, I understand that, and thank you for pointing that out. We have had a director of attendance for many, many years who is compensated as a coordinator of attendance within the county. If that is the recommendation, then that is the practice that we would recommend to the board. But we will certainly explain that more clearly should that be the direction that we go in.
Yeah, I'm just suggesting that you follow the state code on that. But
Yes, ma'am, and I'm conveying that we do and we will continue to.
So, and then it says that there wouldn't be a fiscal impact. But if you change positions from coordinator to director, there is a change because there's a pay increase.
If it says no fiscal impact, and in particular where the coordinator and the director position, we have a coordinator and we have a director already, and then there would simply be a swap of those titles. We would still have one director and one coordinator and no fiscal impact from that.
Okay, just looking at director of attendance, create coordinator of attendance, it says, no fiscal impact, responsibility change. But if you're riffing the director and it's, the person is now being given the new title of coordinator, which I guess we have to check with the attorney to see if you can even do that, but it says no fiscal impact, but coordinator is paid less than director, correct?
Correct, ma'am, and if you will read that entire section, you will see that those safety responsibilities would be placed with the Director of Operational Safety, which is currently a coordinator. Again, the end result being there is one director's position and one coordinator's position, and should that be the way that we end up proposing to the board, there would still be a director position and a coordinator position in terms of fiscal impact.
Looking at this volume of extracurricular and arts programs, are you referring to band and theater? Is that what you're referring to?
In terms of the extracurricular and arts, yes, ma'am.
But aren't they curricular? The students go to classes, they get credits, and so that's not extracurricular.
Well, it's arts, ma'am, and if I understood correctly, which is why I'm having this conversation to ask, when the board previously came and said both for extracurricular and for the arts program, they believed that they would prefer more consistency and ubiquitousness throughout the county, as well as someone to pursue grant opportunities for greater funding and to start new programs. That was in both the arts program and for extracurricular.
Yeah, I mean, this, you saying the board, I guess it was, you know, I don't know what you're referring to. I wasn't part of that, so I don't, unless you're talking about recently when Ms. Ogden suggested, is that what you're referring to?
Ms. Ogden recently stated that again, and that was 2 years ago, part of a central office reorganization that was a suggested position, and at the time, we believed that the fiscal impact of that was too great compared to other priorities, and as you see on those suggestions, we still believe while it continues to be a worthy goal, it is still, we believe, a fiscal impact that we don't wish to bear, but we could assign that to an existing coordinator position.
This potentially eliminating assistant athletic directors and then creating a board position for an athletic director. So that leaves you with 3 people instead of 4. And the important thing for these high schools is that they have bodies to manage the different sporting events. So as it is, the athletic director can't be at both places, so the assistant would be at one. This plan makes it even more difficult because now you only have 3. It seems more logical to, instead of the athletic director, even have a second assistant at each school, because your argument has only been that there's a difference in these programs. Well, if the programs aren't being run the way that, you know, consistently, then that would be the school principals who should get together and decide, correct? So I guess I don't understand why a whole new position would be needed.
Well, if you read that, ma'am, you will note that while we have received that from the board, that is not our recommendation. That, however, if that is how the board chooses to proceed, this is our recommendation on how it could be done with a minimum fiscal impact.
I understand that, but I'm giving my opinion and asking questions. And again, I just want to make it clear that it would be more of a burden to the schools to lose assistant athletic directors, because there are even less professionals there at the games. And they're, we already need probably 3 at each, because if you have softball, track, and soccer, or not soccer, there's another 3 going in the spring, tennis, you can't have, somebody's gonna miss out. Fortunately, some of these, you have people that have been coaching for many years, and they can run these programs, but anyway, I would advise against that for those reasons. There were a couple others that I had questions about. This special ed, it's a new position for an assistant superintendent. Now, I mean, why not just a coordinator? I mean, why do you need an assistant superintendent for 1 year why can't the people that are already, I think, isn't the assistant superintendent and you have the pupil services director, couldn't the 2 of them combine to, or form a group to look into some of these things? And I don't, the day treatment centers, they require psychologists, doctors. I mean, I believe it's hard enough to recruit psychologists, let alone, these other professionals. I just think maybe looking into a study, instead of hiring an assistant superintendent to spend a year, I don't know if that's the best use of money, and so that's, but can you clarify? Because maybe I'm missing something.
I can clarify that we have not proposed any position level to the board, and we would at budget time if you agree that that is something that you wish to pursue. If you believe that us paying day treatment fees to out-of-state facilities because of the inherent difficulty of staffing an in-county facility, then no, we certainly wouldn't propose that. That is part of the dialogue to figure out what you believe is important and what you think we need or don't need to focus on.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking, that's why I'm bringing it up. I understand that's part of the dialogue, that's why I'm dialoguing.
Just got one more time to do that.
What's that?
Yes, ma'am. I need to hear you.
I haven't said anything else.
Okay.
Can I interrupt and ask one quick question about that assistant superintendent position?
We
For
simply
the-
said a new position, but yes, ma'am.
Right.
It says it right here on the paper you gave us.
Well, the new position for special ed. You think that that is a worthwhile position because of the fact that special ed right now is, it's bleeding us dry, especially the out-of-state programs, for 2 reasons. Number 1, fiscally, and number 2, because of the fact that that was one thing that the state came back and slapped our wrist on. That was something that they said that we were out of compliance with. So you believe that this position would be able to solve both of those problems, is that correct? Or not solve them, but help them?
I believe that we need to have someone with a singular focus on there are some very specific programmatic issues that we have that are driving costs. And if there is someone that is their specific task focus for those efforts, I think that we'll have more movement rather than having the folks who are currently running a rather massive program in the day-to-day operations in it to then turn around and pivot, and on top of that do some program creation, which takes a significantly larger amount of time. But again, part of this is just finding what you believe to be a priority, and then we can go back and adjust and make suggestions based on how you convey the program priorities.
Okay. So going off of my memory here really quick, I don't have the list in front of me, but the first position, would you mind putting it back up really quickly, the screen
No,
share?
no.
I'm sorry.
No, that's quite all right.
Just so we can go through it quickly and,
Okay.
okay, so the first one was the program part. It's
Responsive
pretty much,
instructional programs, yes ma'am.
right, it's pretty much everything except traditional learning.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that correct?
Yes ma'am.
Okay, and we've kind of come to the conclusion that we're anything but traditional these days, it seems. So, if you think that that's what we need, then does anybody have any thoughts on that position?
And again, I want to be super clear at this point. I'm not asking you to approve positions.
Right.
I
No, but
really
you just want our input.
clarity on input on
Right.
programs. Yes.
And if you don't mind if we just take 5 minutes to go through
Sure.
this really
Absolutely,
quickly?
yes ma'am.
That way, if somebody has input on any particular one, we can say it and move forward. Does that work?
Yes ma'am.
All right.
That would be staffed by somebody internally that we already have.
Yes, sir.
Which one are we on
The
now?
first one.
Very
The
first
very
one.
first one, okay.
First, let me
That's-
say, Dr. Gibson, that I like the way that this has been grouped anyway as far as looking long-term, and I commend the fact that you have looked at all of these pieces because, as we know, these are all pieces that we have good leadership in many areas leading these different pieces, but we don't have these technically under an umbrella that we can say, we have oversight with this, this, and this, unless it is Mr. Dilly or you, or, whoever going to try to find information. Or there's something that kind of falls through the cracks and then it's, let me go check and see how this is doing, because there's always fires burning, right? That's just the nature of a school system. There's always things going on. So I do like the fact that I feel like this is a good list, if you will, of some good instructional programs that we feel like are not going anywhere, that need attention. And I think, again, anything we give attention to, we're going to get results from. And there are many areas I feel like we don't have attention given to them yet. So I like this idea of bringing all those together, personally.
I understand the logic, of course. My question here for this first position is why, why is it come from coordinator to director? There's a pay increase now. So can you explain that?
Yes,
Why and where would the money come from?
Much like we did with SOMO, we tasked someone who was already a coordinator and had responsibility for all of those, additionally with supervising the individuals of all of the other programs and creating a referral system and a staffing out system for those. This is exactly the same model. So for instance, you have a coordinator who is currently responsible for just one aspect of those programs, say career and technical education. They would then continue to supervise that individual program. They would also become responsible for all of those other program supervision, as well as creating an overarching referral system and creating a staffing multidisciplinary team system and overseeing that model. So that's a significant increase in responsibility. So yes, it would be addressed, at least in my mind, and again, that will be something for the board to determine when we bring any positions in as part of the budget. At least in my mind, that's a significant increase in responsibility.
But I mean, this is, so there's already a responsive education person, or you're not calling it that?
We don't already have a responsive education person, no ma'am. No ma'am.
That was the SOMO, you're putting that under, so.
She's using that as the example, the hierarchy of SOMO she's putting under this responsive instruction program.
So, I'm just trying to understand, because there were a lot of raises already, so it just appears that some of these who didn't get raises maybe in the first go-round, they're gonna get a raise this time because they're gonna get a new title. I mean, that's my question is, you know, where does this position come from? I mean, so how much more responsibility has been added to this first position? Coordinator, CTE coordinator position that you're riffing. How much more?
All of this.
That was what, and I apologize if I explained that poorly. So we would be riffing the coordinator position.
I understand, I
And
see
then
that.
we would be creating a director's position and then hiring someone into that position. Now, they would then be responsible for both all of the work that the previous coordinator did as well as the responsive education program that we're proposing to model off of SOMA.
So my question was how much more work is it? So that is the SOMO, or the responsive education, and that's what.
So Donna, basically, just to kind of help you understand a little bit. So basically, if you look at this, what you're going to do is you're going to think about the current CTE coordinator is responsible for one thing on that list, CTE. This new person is now going to be responsible for CTE, all virtual instruction 6 through 12.
Yeah, I understand that.
So that's the extra work that you're asking about. So their responsibilities are going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-fold. Now they're responsible for
That's
7
what I'm
jobs, not
asking.
1. Yeah.
Is it that there are 7 more things? Isn't this, I guess, Mr. Soltis' position? Is that what this one is currently?
Currently.
And he does the career and technical? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And, does he do adult ed? Is that part of it?
So,
I'm just trying to understand how much more. It's not
Okay.
it's not that he only did 1, and there's 6 more,
well,
like
if
Ms. Ogden is suggesting.
if
I'm just
you
trying to get a general idea.
and again, am more than happy to sit down with you at any point and answer every question that you have about every one of these programs. I will convey, if you will look at virtual instruction 6 through 12, and as part of the explanation, we had nearly 500 parents return surveys saying that they felt like they would want to take advantage of a virtual program for the next 21-22 school year. Someone has to be responsible for that virtual program moving forward. It won't constitute its own school. It does, however, all of those students, they need to be registered, they need to be tracked, there has to be teachers hired for that specifically. It has to have a systematic oversight, and right now, we don't have a coordinator of virtual. We don't have, so this position would have to build and supervise that program as well. It is
Okay,
a
so
significant
So it's
increase in
just the virtual
responsibility.
that's been added, it looks like then. It's the virtual that's being added.
The virtual, that is one of the things being added, yes, ma'am.
Do you know which other things are being added? It's just, there's only like 8 here, so we've got that it's virtual. Can you just tell me which other ones are being added?
Again, perhaps I'm making myself unclear. There is currently a coordinator position that is responsible for career and technical education and adult education. That position will be riffed. We would then create
I
a director
understand
of
in the
responsive
public, 'cause I'm
education.
asking for the public, so if you don't have to talk down. You can just tell me clearly. So all I've asked
I'm very
is-
much attempting
okay.
to, ma'am, and if you
Career,
would let
tech
me.
ed, and adult ed, that's what the CTA coordinator currently does.
Yes,
And the
ma'am.
rest is new. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
all I wanted to know. I don't need a special meeting, I just needed that. I'm sorry if it took so long to get that. You know, if you didn't understand my question, if I wasn't clear, but that's all I wanted to know is what would be the clear difference in these positions? So it went from just career tech and adult ed to now about 8 things. Correct? Yes? Okay, thank you.
Okay, number 2,
Well, that was the assistant superintendent of special ed that I'm not understanding why we would hire an assistant superintendent. I understand that you would want somebody with capability, but I mean, if it's just for a year,
are you back on,
you said number 2,
I'm sorry,
going down what she gave out.
And again,
My personal opinion just would be that, obviously, I've been very passionate about how I feel about special ed, and I'm very, very happy to hear about somebody, again, giving focus to that and looking at some new alternatives. And I think everything that you said makes a lot of sense based on, you know, what we have seen and just frankly the changes, as you even stated, in special ed over the years. How the leadership team decides to do that, if they feel like an assistant assistant superintendent of special ed will give us the value of a person that we need to be able to look at launching a new treatment facility or doing those types of things. However you feel, and that's what, you know, you recommend, I will feel comfortable with that based on that coming from the leadership team, because I feel like we do need, I think the encompassing idea of you understanding the value of what we need is here. I don't have a problem with it being either way. It is a 1-year special assignment, seeing how that goes, making sure that it's mandatory as far as what we get done here, and then looking to the future of that. Again, I don't have a problem with how it's done, if that's how you feel, knowing what you know about special ed that I don't, and your background in it as well. So
It just
you know.
sounds like you want a consultant more than, you know, unless it's like what Ms. Ogden is saying, that you wanna just see how it goes and thinking about hiring this person permanently. Is that, or are you looking at a consultant? Cause that's what it sounds like the way it's written, that it's just for a year, a specialist, to get something started.
we have the capacity to do either. And again, I'm attempting to establish the board's comfort level with these as needs and any proposed response. To your point, if the board felt that a consultant, whether it's a firm or an individual, was capable of providing what we needed in that instance, then that's a determination of the board. We can look at a variety of options and bring those back during the budget process.
We most definitely have to find some way to get these students back in our system. Not all of them, but some of them, because we've been cited on that. And we have to find, and it will save us a pile of money if we bring them back properly and are able to serve them within our school system.
But you're cited on, I don't know, was it 1 or 2 students, I think? I mean, that was my understanding.
I
That
think it was
information
on the
wasn't
number
correct.
of students that we're sending out of county,
Well,
was it not?
what happened was that there were too many white students being sent, and that might have just been by a child, 1 child or 2. So it's not, that argument, I don't, you know, it doesn't have a lot of weight, because it could be that if it's just a matter of 1 child, that, I mean, a lot of times if they have a 1-to-1, you could have a 1-to-1 and they don't need to go out, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know every case, but that's a lot cheaper than, you know, hiring a doctor. And all the other specialists. So if you can, maybe 5 one-to-ones are a lot more doable. They can stay within their own school, and you don't need to go this route. But yeah,
These
I
were all
don't know.
beyond one-to-ones.
I think they go through a systematic way of figuring out that child's needs. And if they needed one-to-ones, we'd be keeping them in the school system and giving them a one-on-one. But
Yeah, I said I don't know.
evidently, the systematic thing they've gone through has shown that they need more than that.
And as of right now, we can't meet those needs here, so we have to send them out. I mean, it's definitely the last resort of doing that, to send them out. But I also feel like if we don't get to this level, as an assistant superintendent of instruction, Mr. Dilly has the instruction of a lot of students. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of purpose to target students, the general, if you will, I hate those words, but student population. We need a targeted response for the fairness and equity of special education students in our county, in my opinion. I feel like the only way to get that to where we create a system of it's about educational opportunities, and they may look like this or they may look like this. They're the same, but they're different based on the student. And the only way we're going to get that is to have that overarching piece of somebody that, number one, is focusing on it, and somebody who takes the lead on it. I think, frankly, an assistant superintendent of special education is, in my opinion, it's a great idea. Whether it's a one-year assignment or we need it for longer, I frankly think we should have had it 5 years ago. That's my personal opinion. But especially to create, you know, a day treatment facility or something where we can educate all of our students in the same fairness and equity. And we don't have that right now. I think the review and the revisions, and you talked about the state and what we can and can't do, or maybe having their oversight and help. You know, all of those things take time, and we are spending so much money over here that frankly this position would be paid for and then some of the money that we save. And to me, irregardless of the money, it's going to be about the value and equity of the education of students with special needs. That to me is where we need to go and what we need to look at. And so to me, I would see that as an extremely valuable asset, that once, you know, this comes into play and we look at what we need to do and have somebody, because I don't feel like we have stretched the bandwidth of everybody that we possibly can here. And I appreciate the fact that everybody is working well above any of their pay grades, frankly, and very, very hard. So if you want to do anything like this or even move this to another level, which it needs to be, there's no way to do that without a person to do it. And to hire a consultant to do it, I don't know that they are going to be as invested in Jefferson County. I want somebody who is going to be invested in Jefferson County because they care about Jefferson County kids and Jefferson County schools, and I don't know that a consultant from the outside is going to do that. But that, you know, I don't know what we would get, but that's my personal opinion.
But if you're only hired for a year, how invested are you going to be as well? And my point about the one-to-one, I'm talking about just as far as the legal issue with the state. But the other thing is, I know that Grafton used to be in some of the schools. So as, you know, it may be cheaper and easier for the time being. You know, I don't know the overall. I definitely believe the whole special ed program here needs a complete overhaul. There are so many problems, and it's not just this need for to deal with the legal issue with the state. I mean,
So
I
Dr.
don't wanna
Joy,
get
do you
into that.
feel like if it needs a whole overhaul, so do you feel like this assistant superintendent of special ed needs to be hired to overhaul the special education system and stay for more than a year?
if I was going to hire an assistant superintendent of special ed, it would be for more than just this one project. It would be for the whole special ed program. I mean, if they're just being hired for this, then there's, like I said, I feel like there's alternatives, like a consultant or bringing places like Grafton back in the schools. They used to be at Jefferson.
So what I hear you saying is if they come back with this proposal to the board, you'd like to see this with a more all-encompassing job description on what they do.
Yeah, if you're gonna do it, you might as well do it right, because it's been, I don't wanna get into the.
No, I mean, I think we
Well,
all
but-
agree. We all agree with that. We need changes in it. So I think that's a fair assessment, and I think that's a good recommendation.
I think we all agree with that. However, you know, this person needs to focus on this problem first, and then they can transition into, you know, whatever other issues that need to be addressed. I mean, this is, you know, a focus, and I would much rather hire somebody than to hire a consultant, because we need the person to not just, you know, figure out what needs to be done, but get it done and maintain it and continue to do it. So, I mean, I support you guys adding your position. You figure out what you want that position to do, and then figure out what title is appropriate for that position.
But that's what I was saying, if it's only for a year, that if it was a permanent position where,
So you'd like to see a more robust,
We
more
don't
than
need
one-year
a
title.
permanent position right at this point. You know, this, our staff, for this operation, is probably the best in the state, and I'd right offhand put it in almost any other county around here. We've got a good staff. When they bring something before us, you can bet that they have put a lot of thought and a lot of time in putting something together that will do what needs to be done. That's what we're dealing with here. And when that comes up, if we do all this chicken picking of all this stuff, taking up a lot of time
well, I've
and
got my
running
rubber
around in this,
stamp.
or I'm
You
talking
wanna
now.
borrow it?
We don't need to do all of this nitpicking with it. If we believe in the people that we are paying, people who know what they're doing, they have degrees that they have to sit in that position, then I don't know why we're sitting here with all this nitpicking. The question is, that's the recommendation, and nitpicking back and forth isn't gonna make it any better, it's gonna make it worse. So let's move on with it and let it go and get the job done and be done with it.
So Dr. Gibson, do you feel like you have a clear consensus on where the board wants to go forward with this position?
Yes, ma'am, I do, and I will ensure that I have a job description based on all of your input when I bring it back.
Awesome. Madam Superintendent, are we on number 3?
Okay, that was the attendance one, I believe.
Yes, ma'am.
Any issues with the attendance proposal?
Well, I already said that
Your director versus coordinator, but they're moving the safety person to maintenance, so that takes care of that, I believe.
And
Dr.
again,
Gibson, if
I
you could just-
understand
can-
Dr. Joy's concerns as she articulated them, and I will certainly bring back a proposal that addresses those concerns, yes.
Okay.
I do like the idea of putting those together in that way. It does make a lot of sense, especially with the safety issue. So, with putting that with somebody who actually knows what the buildings are and what the safety issues are and are not, that's a good idea.
What else was on that list?
for
Ms. Ogden?
accountability.
We
transition.
had also discussed, adding, accountability reporting to the testing position. And again, just ensuring that for all of the programs, we are effectively serving children and efficiently using tax dollars.
And that makes sense. Anybody have issue with that?
This one looks good. Is the secondary ed coordinator, how much does that person do this already, or, 'cause I thought they were handling testing, no, for secondary?
No, ma'am, that,
They-
we do have a testing coordinator, and that person would be responsible for this as well, because it would be across pre-K-12, ma'am.
Yeah, that one looks pretty good.
Okay, the next recommendation was,
Was with the, athletic programs at the high school.
I can't support putting a position here at the county office for that. I know that we have some inequities, and I think part of those inequities are the personalities of those schools, but there are some inequities that need to be addressed by principals. I don't think we are a system of this size where we can afford to have somebody manage two schools.
I absolutely agree with everything you said.
Can I give my 2 cents? Because I'm going to be the other side.
That's fine.
So for me, I look at it as we have a director, athletic director at one school and an athletic director at another school. If we put a coordinator of athletics at the central office and 2 assistant full-time coordinators at the high schools to be able to advocate for the needs of both the high schools, you are, if you want to keep the assistant athletic directors for their stipend positions, that's very, going to be very little net money that is going to be needed to fund these, number one. Number two, I feel like the 2 areas in our school system that we do not focus on well are arts and athletics, and that's why they were in that original reorganization plan. I feel like the fact that it took us 10 years to get turf at Jefferson, that it took us forever and a day to get a field at Wildwood, that we still have lights at Jefferson and do not have lights at Washington for baseball and softball, that we had to have somebody come and ask for a mat. It's not that the principals don't want to oversight that. It's that the principals should not necessarily have to oversight that. The only reason that I feel like we have such big discrepancies, even in the funding, right? We don't have anybody that says, other than a board person, like you're saying, what if a board down the road decides that they don't think any of that's important? There's nobody advocating to say, here's the pot of money, I know that there needs to be these helmets at this school this year, these helmets at this school this year, these helmets at this school this year, there's equity. There needs to be these pads here, there needs to be these cheerleading mats here, there needs to be these wrestling mats here. There's no one person that actually knows what's in all the buildings and is paying attention to any of the stuff, whether it's a scouting program to get our kids the actual, futures that they're looking for, that's actually managed so that all the schools have all the information. I think, yes, you guys are exactly right. We cannot do this without putting a person who's responsible for both of those schools and having them in the building. You're 100% right, because they are their own entities, right? They're still county rivals in a fun way. A lot of those kids play county leagues and rec leagues together, so they know each other, and that's part of the fun. But at the same time, if we do not put somebody who's focusing on athletics as a whole in the county, we're never going to get any further than we are right now. We get feedback from a parent, oh, we got this issue, and oh, we got this issue, or we have frankly, we have a trophy that shows up at one school and never gets to the other school. Well, that wasn't the principal's responsibility to make sure that happens. That's not fair to say to them either. So it continues to happen and continues to happen. So then where does it fall? Oh, we'll get a hold of the superintendent. Well, okay, now she's digging into 15 different reviews of information. do we even know that all coaches at all schools, that means middle schools as well, are being evaluated every year like they should? We don't know that because we don't have anybody in charge of it except the specific people at those schools. And we tried very wholeheartedly to ask, you know, Mr. White up here to somehow bring them together and try to formulate a meeting. But he's so engulfed in SOMO stuff that, again, it's not his passion, it's not his love, it's not his focus. And we are never going to get any further, whether it's extracurricular intramural sports, which to her credit, Ms. Roper brought up years ago. We're never going to get anything like that for any other students, ever, unless we have somebody focusing on it. And I think with the retirement of or resignation, I don't know whether, you know, Mr. Schaefer had gone to another school or retired, I can't remember. Right now is the time to do that before we put the money back in there. I think, like I said, net, by still providing them with all of the pieces that they have, but by adding that, by doing it as a coordinator and not a director, and by putting the assistants there full time, but again, I still think you can do it net for very little money, but yet the overarching responsibility and putting out an SOP. How about we just put out that person would be responsible to actually send documentation to parents as to what's going on with middle school and high school sports now that we're red. You know how many questions I had to field on that? I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. I know high school sports are out, but I don't know what's going on with middle school. Well, let me talk to the coach. They're reaching out to the coach. Well, this coach says this. Well, this coach says this. Well, this coach says it's this person's responsibility and they made the decision. Well, this coach says it. Oh, I can tell you it wasn't my decision. So, again, I feel like...
I think that's some of the craziness of the state, Dave.
Well, and I get that, but if we don't get somebody who's responsible to say, here's the memo, folks. Here's what's happening in Jefferson County schools, and this is what we do, and this is how it works, and this, for net, no money,
I can't support it. No,
that's
no
okay.
comment.
That's okay. I'd rather do it when it doesn't cost us than when it does.
The current athletic directors, it could be added to their job description to advocate, you know, at the board office. Or, you know, if you just want one coordinator, then you don't need athletic directors at both.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, you need an assistant coordinator position who works full-time at both schools, because you're right, Donna, they need a body there and they need somebody to advocate for them as Jefferson or Washington, because they're very different entities. But you still need somebody who makes one final decision for one Jefferson, in my opinion, before it continues to grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and we still have all these different pieces, and there's no one making a decision that this school over here is doing this and this school over here isn't, and then we have another fire to put out because we find out, well you could do that if you want to too, but this coach doesn't want to, or this AD doesn't want to, or it's just, I think it's very mismatched.
I could say the population was increasing, but it's not. I mean, the students are decreasing every year, so we like he said, we don't have the number of students to warrant another board position or all these board positions, especially when the population is decreasing. And it sounds like there's personnel issues going on. I mean, I don't know exactly what the details are. I mean, I know what I went through you know, my children doing sports. So I've seen a lot of the problems, but I saw it as administration. I felt that the principals could have stepped in and made things a lot better. I don't know at Washington if it's the same way, but definitely at Jefferson, that was my experience. And my children played 4 sports. They did 4 sports, so I saw a lot. And I coached, so no, they did 5 sports, and I coached. So, and I think it comes down to the school administrator as far as the athletic directors, and if we were growing, you know, we're not half as big as, or I guess we're half as big as Berkeley. I could see, increasing board positions for things like that, but we're on the decline.
Well, and in that regard, Berkeley County does their AD position actually as an assistant superintendent position.
But they have, a lot more students.
I'm just saying they do it differently, and I can definitely tell you from the county that I'd come from years ago, it was the same amount of students as we have here, and it's one central office coordinator, and that's how it's done. So, again, it's not, this is a new idea, I get, but it's actually done most of the time this way across the country. It's new to us, yeah, it's different. And I don't have a problem with it, but then I guess if we're not gonna go with something like this, then we need somebody has oversight somewhere. I mean, give me another idea of where we get that kind of oversight and job done. Who's responsible when the parents call?
The
How do we
athletic
do it?
directors at the school are responsible. If they're not doing their job, they need to be told that by the principal.
So do you feel, Mark, as a principal of an elementary school, if you were a principal of a high school, it'd be fair for you to also have to manage athletics?
That's part of the job. You're managing the school, the whole school. Athletics are part of the whole school. I think the athletic director's jobs are one of the best jobs there are at those schools. And you're a cheerleader for those students. You have a great job, but you gotta be there and you gotta do it. Now, maybe their schedule needs to be different. Maybe they need to come at 12 o'clock because they're staying evening for games and things of that such. But, and maybe assistant principals might need to have to step up and supervise some of those games, because I don't know that one person's gonna be able to get to all those games. But there has to be a way to do it, and we're not a system large enough that I feel that we need a county office position to do that. I think we've gotten better. Are we where we want to be? No. But I think we could do that with what we have if we have good athletic directors.
So you feel like right now the recommendation is before we hire another athletic director to rewrite those job descriptions so that they're fair and equitable at both schools and make them responsible for it?
I can't say that they're gonna be exactly the same at both schools. Even with a person here at the county office, schools have their own personalities.
Well, I think what you're saying is though, as far as their responsibilities being
Their responsibilities need to be very similar. But I can tell you, over the years, we have not had some strong athletic directors. And that has been an issue.
I agree. I think that the principal need maybe start that route, with a little training.
And I think the
Principals
meetings that
first.
you have had them have they've never been together as a group till here recently.
Mhm.
So how were they supposed to know what they were supposed to do? I think getting them together as a group and sitting down a couple times a year has helped for us to get more consistency. Now, are we where we want to be? No. But I think we can head in that direction.
And maybe the current job descriptions need to be
Maybe they
reviewed.
need to be
And
looked
maybe,
at.
I mean, they might be 50 years old for all we know. I mean, I don't know.
And
when
while
they were
we're
last
on that
looked at.
subject, I have a little bit of an issue. I have a little bit of an issue when I pick up the paper in the morning and Berkeley County's got their schools write-ups in the paper and we don't have them. I don't know whose responsibility it is, but I know when my dad coached, he came home at night and called the paper and gave them the summary of the contest. I don't know whether it was his responsibility, but that's how it got in the paper.
And we don't have a central office person making sure that's in there.
But I'm not sure
So that goes in the new job description.
Clearly
that's not getting done either.
our kids need to see their names in the paper and see write-ups on the games.
No, you're right. You're right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
it's
You better
the-
get some new papers.
Well, I don't know whose responsibility it is.
I can certainly bring back to the board, based on all the feedback that you've given me, a revised job description. Now, I'll take it by, both the principals first, obviously, but I'll bring it to the board and you can say whether or not you believe that is, sufficient to meet that need. And if not, you always have the option of coming back and, reworking in any way you see fit, a proposal for that. But to your point, if you want to start there, very happy to start there.
I mean, it's the little things, like the NCAA, eligibility forms that kids have to fill out. I mean, I'm sure that wasn't online years ago.
Right.
But if there could be, you know, some sort of workshop for these kids to get it done before it's too late,
Right.
before they realize that they're not eligible, or, I mean, there are just a lot of things that go
There's a
on
lot
with
of little
athletics,
things like that, yes.
and they're little details, but they're important little details.
That many times are not shared. And that's frustrating. And I think that some of the ways too that some of these athletic directors pay for different subscriptions to do videos and upload this and that, frankly, maybe we pay one price and the whole county has access to it, but this AD is not computer savvy and doesn't know how to do it. Well, that's not fair either, right? I mean, so again, that's not gonna change unless somebody makes it change. I mean, it has to be what is best for students, and I'm not seeing that happen in any way, shape, or form in many ways. And we still don't have a way then as well, we need a way to have who's gonna be in charge of, here is the full amount of stuff we have, here's the equipment we have, what is the rotation and the pile of money as far as how that's rotating for safe and, you know, safe mats, safe helmets, safe pads, new balls, new uniforms, all those things are all a part of that, and right now we don't have a clue.
I would say of two schools that are of similar size, that it would not be difficult to get the ADs together and to say, okay, you know, you're gonna do this many helmets this year. You're gonna, cause I would say that the squads should be of fairly close in size. So it shouldn't be something that would be that hard to do.
No, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying you've got two high school programs and not just football that you have to worry about.
No, but I'm
You have
just using that
bats
as an
and-
example.
Right, and then you have field maintenance and you have, like I said,
Well,
lights
like the
and you
pole
have
vaulting
all those things, right,
pads. That's,
right.
they're gonna wear out in so many years.
right.
You know, so that should be on the list. And that should be on our list.
Right, and then you
Because-
have 4 middle schools.
Now, and probably it should be defined at, okay, we're giving this athletic department this amount of money. Okay, this is what it's for, okay? It's for reconditioning helmets, it's for this, for this, for this, baseballs. It's, but is it for the pad for the pole vault thing? Is that included in that, or is that not included in that? Because that's a big ticket item. It's not like we get the track guy, we give him X amount of dollars and he's gotta resurface the track.
Well, and again, that, if that doesn't go in a job description, that it is your responsibility to keep track of your inventory and submit that to the board office every year for review, and what you need and blah, 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 guess whose responsibility that becomes? Dr. Gibson's.
I would think if each school has 80 helmets, there's gonna be a similar amount of them wear out per year. So it shouldn't be rocket science to figure that, what you're doing per year. If those guys get together and sit down and can do that.
Well, I think we're working our way to it. But when it really comes down to it, if we're spending money on any given item every year, that ought to be in the budget year. And if, you know, if these things come up like we're talking about now, if that comes up and that looks like that's gonna be something that we have to pay for every year, then it ought to be in the budget.
In our budget, yes.
Yeah, in our budget, right, and that's the only way we're gonna ever be able to keep out with coming up and say, okay, this year we have to make making a new, football surface or whatever that, so we need an extra $1 million. Where's it gonna come from? Well, we'll take a little here, and we'll take a little here, and we'll take a little here. You know, instead of that, and we put up, 10% a year or 20% a year, whatever it calls for. And that comes up, and especially for all these ones that are high dollar deals.
Well, and maybe you end up doing it where part of the job descriptions of your athletic director is also to get the reports from the feeder schools, from the feeder middle schools. And they report to the high school, and that one report comes up to say, I need this, this, and this, or this is what my this is what my inventory is, this is what I have, this is what I need. And every year, it's done that way, and then it kind of, not only does it feed up the chain, but it also continues the communication between your high schools and your feeder schools, because that's where your athletes are gonna come from. And you have a better idea of what they have, what they don't have, and maybe what resources you can share to be able to, go back and forth with that.
Well, that would be, but, that would work, especially if, if school X is gonna feed into school Y, and this year they're gonna send them 300, and next year they're gonna send them 400, just to use the number.
Mhm.
Then they at least know what they're looking for down the pipe.
I think the big thing, and I think we've started in the right direction, but is communication between these people. And those people never sat down at the table with each other till recently. And I think they made quite a bit of progress in the short time that they've been sitting down at the table with
Well, and
each other.
remember, they sat down with the table with each other because we put somebody at the central office to bring them together.
Right, but I don't think it's a full-time job.
Well, I can tell you about times, and probably you can too, but, when you, one from middle school to high school, that was a, it was not necessarily, a friendly.
Wasn't a pleasant thing necessarily.
Wasn't a friendly move.
So Dr. Gibson, I think we've strayed off topic just a little bit here because athletics are just so fun to talk about because it's,
It's a dear to our hearts.
everybody
It
loves
is.
athletics. So I think you have an idea of where we're going with this?
Absolutely, ma'am.
Okay. So you have a good idea overall, your entire proposal?
We still have one more.
Oh,
Yeah,
what was the last one?
Fine arts, extracurricular and arts programs.
And your thought was to put it under the new attendance position?
Yes, ma'am. As opposed to an additional position in the system, yes. But again, I'll take any direction from the board, just as you did with the AD or with any others, how you would like me to approach addressing it.
I can't support a position at the county office, a lone position at the county office for that at this point in time.
Yeah, me neither, but if she's not asking for that though, she's just saying to combine it, I
Right,
don't
combining it's
understand.
a different issue altogether.
Yeah, and I just, I don't see the connection between the coordinator of attendance and the arts. Like, what is your thought on that?
Good question. In looking at a place to put that, we were trying to find a place that, someone we felt like could have the bandwidth and that had some connection. You are right, it is it's a very, tenuous connection, but the thought was if that person is involved in activities that are going to boost student performance, and truthfully it makes more sense with the extracurricular than with the arts. Certainly you'd have to get a very interesting mix of skill sets in order for them to also cover the arts. I think it would make more sense with extracurricular than it would with extracurricular and arts and attendance, but again, I'm tasked with trying to find ways to cover these things with existing staff to the greatest extent possible, so.
It makes no less sense than attendance and safety. I mean, which we just
Which-
fixed.
true.
So then we're gonna add something else that's wacko, but
Well, the argument is issues with inconsistency again, and that goes back to, I think, the principles and the job descriptions of maybe, I don't know. I don't know what the specific issues are, but, this inconsistency.
I think basically from what we've heard, what we've seen, frankly, what we probably as parents have experienced is some schools, even down to the elementary level, have very robust music and art programs, and it's exciting, and they do little plays, or they have an end of the year this or that, or you get to do recorder karate, or you get to do all these fun things, and you get to middle school, and you have, again, you're doing clay and modeling and all these great exciting things, and some are and some aren't, and you're getting to high school, and some choral programs have great show choir uniforms every year, and some don't. You have theaters that have this and theaters that don't. You have, band is really part of WVSSAC, but it's considered an art. And just, who has what instruments and band camps and uniforms and some of those things, we have worked really hard to try. Again, it's come from the board, just because we were already involved in those things, to try to help make recommendations. That may not always be.
I think you're gonna have a hard time standardizing all of that, though.
And I don't know that it has to
Do
be.
you say you can't have kindergarten graduation?
No.
Or
And
or
no.
everybody's gonna have kindergarten
And I'm not saying
graduation?
that it has to be somehow standardized. I'm just saying to be able to have somebody who is looking at arts programs. And I don't know that, like you're saying, does it need to be one person solely responsible for this? In my personal opinion, I feel like, frankly, with the help of Randall Reed Lewis, they could write enough grants for our arts and music programs that they would pay for themselves.
Smith,
Randall Smith Lewis.
We've
is-
gone-
Randall Reed
we've-
Smith.
Randall Reed Smith, thank
we-
you.
we've
I
gone
love
to-
his name and I never can remember
We
it
went the
already.
grant way, and that didn't seem to work that great.
No, I get it. This cannot be a grant-funded position, no. But we need to find somebody, in some way, shape, or form, somehow, who is again looking at being able to. What about our arts program? Some kids can go. I know of a student who went to WVU on an art program, on an art scholarship.
Right.
So, did they have the same opportunity as another person? Just because of the fact that they had opportunities given to them that the other art teacher
Understood.
was not doing it,
But
and
now
I.
you can move to whatever school you want if that art teacher's good. If that's your cup of tea. But do you tell Mr. Lynch he can't come in here with a McCormick grant for instruments because Washington High doesn't have any extra, can't get any
No.
extra instruments?
No, it doesn't have anything to do with the McCormick grant. It has to
No,
do
I'm
with the
saying,
fact that.
Look at the extra stuff they're getting for arts out there.
Mm-hmm.
Do we say to them, no, Washington doesn't have that, you can't do that?
No, but when Mr. Lynch wants or needs something, or if or who's the band director now at Washington?
It's Mrs. Hazlett.
Mrs. Hazlett wants or needs something, or if one of the middle school art teachers wants or needs something, or one of the art teachers, or one of the dance teachers, or any of those things. How are we making sure that they have what they need? Again, is that another job description change then, or is it, how do we,
Boy, that's gonna be a hard one to tackle, I think.
I think we need to have communication
I'm not-
about it, or we need to have
Communication,
discussion about
absolutely,
it.
but I'm not sure, that's gonna be a difficult one to solve.
The robustness of a program, whether it's, art or an English class, I mean, you're comparing teachers now. It's not really programs. I mean, if you have a really great English teacher in one school and a not so great English teacher in another school, I mean, what do you do? Have a coordinator to make them teach exactly the same? Or, I mean, the arts programs, I'm not sure how we can make those equal, especially with the McCormick stuff.
Yeah.
That's just one
One
tiny
example.
One tiny piece of,
It's a tiny piece, but it's the funding piece, and
But
I
it's
mean,
true.
that's,
Yes.
I'm sure
because it's a lot of
every,
money.
I'm sure every, elementary art teacher would love to have a kiln in their school, or, something, but it just comes down to funding.
and some do.
Yes.
But they were given an allocation from the principal because they were given an allocation from the county office for art and library and music.
And each school uses them as they see fit.
And then there are art teachers that their kiln's not big enough or nice enough, and they sell candy bars and get a bigger one.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
So, you know, I don't have an answer to this one. Bonnie,
Oh, I
don't
don't
put
have
your
an
head
answer.
down.
I guess Mr. Osborne is saying we need to sell more candy bars before we can look at this position again.
I'm fine with that.
Did we beat that dead horse?
I believe it's no longer even twitching, sir.
So you have direction now.
Yes, ma'am, I believe that I do.
And thank
Plenty
you
of
all
it.
for the wonderful conversation.
I do think it, as difficult as it is sometimes, it is good to have those conversations so that
absolutely.
you all know where one another stand and that I know clearly where I have consensus. So
And walk
thank you.
out and respect each other.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we are done with the program needs planning.
Yes,
Do we have any executive session this evening?
no, ma'am.
Okay.
Oh, shucks.
Well, on that note, at 9:22, now that we have approved the levy rates as presented and pending the state auditor approval, per West Virginia Code 11-8-12A, we will reconvene this meeting on April 20th, 2021.
April 20th, yes.
Got it.